Hope folks are doing well, keeping cool. I keep saying keeping warm in my head is what I want to say, but this is when we want to keep cool. Okay. I'm gonna get us started and roll into some of our opening sort of updates and moments, and hopefully we can get more folks to join on. Welcome everyone, July Equity Advisory Group meeting. Very excited to be here with you all. I noticed I saved it for this moment, but PSE, we have a new template for our slides. So we're all going to be on our toes. It looks very fun and exciting, and look at us going into who knows what places. Um, so we'll only have to find out today in our meeting. So welcome everyone. As always, your facilitator, Ishmael Nunez, use he and him pronouns. We will start our meeting with a safety moment. I see Shakisha is on the call. So Shakisha, why don't you kick us off with today's safety moment?
Hey, everyone. So today's safety moment is taking a moment to consider tool safety before taking on
Shakisha,
so
your audio is working, but it's going in and out. It is working, but I don't know if you need to be close to the mic or it's getting really low and sometimes you're fading
Now,
away. That sounds pretty good. Try
perfect.
that.
Okay.
That
Okay.
sounds good.
Okay,
Great.
perfect. Sorry about that. So inspect your tools before use. If they are damaged, cracked, or fraying, or have exposed wires, discard those. If there's excessive wear, chips, or bent components, don't use them, and ensure that all the switches and controls and safety devices are working correctly, and always follow the manufacturer's recommendations. Or if not, check out your local tool library. They will have some items for you too. So that is today's safety moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakisha. Yeah, tool libraries are great. So, and I don't think about going to them for as a resource for tool safety as well. So that's awesome. Okay, I think our equity moment is, I think, I know that it's led by C, and we have like what looks like a really great equity moment. I don't see her on the call yet. And so I'm gonna keep us moving ahead and hopefully C will join. Because before we dive into the meeting today, so I'm gonna skip ahead and see slides and hopefully we get a chance for C to come back. But want to use a brief opportunity here to for M to introduce herself. And you've got slides and content. And so go ahead and let me know when you're going to toggle to your next slide. Hopefully we can get C in the room before then. We can't hear you. Try again.
Geez Louise.
There you go. You're in. You're
Okay,
on.
good. Please let me know if I dip out. Thank you so much. This works great. Hi, everyone. I'm Emm Piro. I use she, her pronouns. I'm joining today from the ancestral and present day lands of the Puyallup people. I grew up here in the Coast Salish region in the Puget Sound, and now I live in Tacoma. I also have pretty deep roots in the Midwest, especially St. Louis. My name might be familiar to some because I come to PSE from working with Uncommon Bridges, but now I'm on the energy equity team. I'm going to be your primary point of contact, and I'm really honored to build on the great foundation that's been laid here. My background is in community organizing. I've worked with people experiencing homelessness and coming out of incarceration in cultural placekeeping work and creative climate work, and in environmental justice coalition building, especially with community-owned and designed bioenergy and soil justice and public health. You'll find me to be someone who's very collaborative, very committed to co-design with communities to take really big systems level vision and break it down into tangible and actionable things. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you to meaningfully move forward a more equitable utility for our region. And we can go to the next slide. All right. So I want everyone to know that I've set up some optional compensated opportunities for us to get more acquainted. I would really love to learn more about you, who you are, your thoughts on energy equity, your work with this group, and really invite you to ask or tell me the things that you feel are most important as we start our work together. The first hours are this Friday over lunch. And then I'm also going to have an evening hour 1 week from right now, next Monday evening. The links were sent in your most recent email. And I'm also going to drop the info again in this chat, and I'm going to send calendar invites if it helps you to be a little easier to remember when those days and times are. Please just disregard if that's not helpful. Again, thanks for having me today, and I really look forward to our work together.
Awesome. I validate everything and co-sign everything that Em said about her own self-description. That's very fair and true. And I know several folks were asking questions about how the energy equity team was going to broaden and fill in for some gaps. And so Em is on board, and yes, would really encourage folks to reach out and chat. Okay, I think as I saw people join. I think I saw there, I can see your face. We were hoping that we could buy a little time. Em did her introduction, so I'm going to go backwards now, because you have our equity moment for today. And so I can toggle your slides as you're ready. I added your question here into the chat so folks can use the chat as a way to respond as we transition onto the next conversation. But appreciate you for kicking that off. I was just thinking, I'm like, this is, you get someone who's an educator to lead an equity moment. You're getting asked questions back too. So that's great. So thank you, C, for setting the tone with that. We already got Em, so I'm going to move past Em here. For the rest of our time together, we're going to spend in two different places. We're going to have Heather and Mark from Integrated System Planning talk a little bit around customer strategy. And then after a short break, we'll have Brian and Uche talk about some updated work on equity metrics, which I know that folks from the early days of the EAG helped to support, and I'm sure that we'll talk about that as well. So I'll help us get over there. One other thing I wanted to acknowledge, as we are in July, and I want to give credit to Carson, who earlier in the month said, hey, it's Disability Pride Month. And so just for folks who are aware or not aware of recognizing that for the month of July. Otherwise, we're going to have great conversation, great discussion today. We're going to be attentive. We're going to be respectful. We're going to be mindful of each other. And I really want to encourage folks that maybe aren't super active. Maybe some folks are really sort of active listeners, processors. Think about how you might choose to come into the conversation, whether that's the chat or aloud. I'll be looking to make sure that we have as many people as possible chatting today. And then finally, we will have public comment prior to the close of the meeting. We'll share instructions at a later point in time, and this meeting, as usual, is being live streamed. So without any further ado, I will hand over the proverbial microphone to Heather and Mark, and I will toggle your slides, and really looking forward to the two of you and the conversation you've got teed up.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, and hopefully my sound is okay. If not, please let me know. Excellent. Okay. Heather Mulligan, I'm the manager of Customer Clean Energy Solutions here at PSE. I've had the opportunity to talk to you all sometimes in the past. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to be working together with my colleague, Mark Lenson, manager of strategic planning, to present some information tonight. Next slide. So the objective of our presentation is for EAG members to understand how our customer programs, including energy efficiency, demand response, and distributed energy resources, are all being factored into our integrated system planning process as we look out at the next 5 years of work, and to really ask for everyone's input on that planning process and how PSE might address some of the programmatic gaps that we've encountered. Next slide, please. So kind of to set the stage, I wanted to kind of give a sense of what technologies we're really looking at, and we're focusing on technologies that can be used by residential and business customers to manage their energy need for their lives or their businesses. It includes technologies such as energy efficiency, or how, generation of solar on site, or even the use of a battery. And as we plan for the future of our system, we know that we'll need to work in partnership with our customers to manage when and how people use energy, especially as more variable resources come online and we see those peaks. But we think that's a really exciting opportunity, and that's a major focus of our integrated system planning process. Next slide, please. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Mark for a little while.
Hi there, a quick mic check. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, cool. Mark Linson, Heather already introduced me, so I'll just jump right into it. Just some context around the integrated system plan. We'll be referring it to as the ISP during this call. But state law requires for energy efficiency and demand response. So EEDR, energy efficiency, demand response. So some of those requirements are deliver energy savings equal to 2% of PSC annual load. And that's looked at as an annual basis. And just for context, we aren't even hitting 1% today. We're below that. So there's this line in the sand that's pretty aggressive as far as an energy savings component for us to achieve. There's also achieved peak demand reductions, and that's 10% of both winter and summer peaks. And we're nowhere near that right now either. That program has been kind of ramping up the past 2 or 3 years, trying to recruit customers to participate in demand response events. And you may be part of those yourselves. The ISP requires us to do 20+ year planning. So this isn't just a 1-year plan, a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan. This is 20. This is trying to understand the large directions that we have to solve for. And also we have to include low income electrification programs. So that's converting customers off of gas to a heat pump, or a gas water heater to electric water heater, those kind of things. So that's electrifying within the homes of those customers. Next slide. So we have a gap. Heather mentioned that gap. That's kind of our theme tonight, is kind of discussing this tension between what we are doing and what we may need to do in the future, and how do we get there with these kind of challenges that we'll describe a little bit here. From energy efficiency or energy conservation, our 10-year average is around 10-year or 250,000 megawatt hours a year. So don't worry too much about the units, but it does help you look at the comparison of what we may need to do at some point. So 250,000 megawatt hours a year, that's our kind of average. So we've been doing that. We've been doing it cost effectively, meeting goals most of the time, except during COVID and right after COVID. So that's kind of our starting point. 2% of the PSC annual load is around 450,000 megawatt hours a year. And it grows every year after that, right? It keeps growing as new load comes online onto our system. So there's this gap that's pretty substantial, around 200,000 megawatt hours. And that's where you kind of see us kind of cringing, going, well, how do I close that gap? We do a thing called a conservation potential assessment, and that's working with a consultant. They try to look at our load forecast, our customer demographics of building size and shape, and try to assess how much can we do, how much conservation is out there. And they do this for like a 20+ year timeline as well. And that's trying to assess, okay, what do we go out and do in the future? And that's showing that conservation potential is actually decreasing, not increasing. And probably one example that I think highlights things pretty obviously to folks is lighting, where everyone used to have incandescent lights. There was a period of time we used CFLs, if you remember, the little squiggly, twirly, curly-Q light bulbs. Those are a phase, and then LED kind of just took over. And so, no, it's not everywhere, but it's cranking. And that's one of those things where the marketplace did its job. It made its movement towards energy efficiency, and oh shoot, now I can't go get savings for that anymore because it's now the standard. So that's one of the challenges in our work, that codes and standards kind of take our work away in the future because we're doing a good job. So that's a good thing, but makes it hard to kind of continue finding new savings. So anyway, we've got a big gap, and trying to wrestle with, well, how do we close that? Next slide. On the demand response side, or the DR side, those are a portfolio of programs and features that are what folks call flexible load. So if we say, hey, we need some help, can you dial this back during a certain period of hours during the peak loads? Customers can do that. Smart thermostats are one example, or behavioral. So some people just opt not to charge stuff or run equipment, electric equipment during that period of time. So there's different ways folks do demand response or load flexibility, and that's been exceeding its performance targets. So we've been growing that program from zero over the last few years, and it's meeting its performance targets. That said, we still have a major gap between what that program can do today and this 10% expectation from the ISP. So that's again this gap of like, hey, this yellow line on the chart, that's what 10% would be into the future. And even when we do our conservation potential assessment to say, what do we think, what do we know is out in the marketplace, and as that grows and has adoption rates of various types, where does that get us? We still have a gap. Now, batteries aren't listed on there, so those may help close the gap, but there's still a gap. So it's not oh yeah, we'll just hit 10% next year without a problem. No, this is a big gap we're wrestling with of how do we provide enough potential from demand response and load flexibility to meet these state required, not required necessarily, because there is the UTC can allow us an off ramp, but that's kind of this aspirational target we're supposed to be looking at. So those are the things we're wrestling with. We don't have a solution right now to meet those new targets or goals that the law set out. So that's what we're wrestling with. I think the next slide, Heather, picks up. Yep.
All right, so now we're going to shift gears over to the distributed energy resource side of things. And
So Heather, this
yeah.
is Troy. If you don't mind, Mark, there are a couple of questions on your presentation chat. The rest of us can speculate, but we think you can easily answer those. So if you can do those before we move on, that would be super helpful.
Okay, no problem. Okay, is this energy savings of all utility costs, gas and electric, or just electric? Good question. The ISP is focused on electric only, so the 2%, 10% are electric targets. We still have EIA targets for gas, so that didn't go away. Actually, we still have them for electric too, so we have multiple targets. But yes, that is electric focused in the integrated system plan for conservation and demand response. What are the biggest chat's all moving around on me. What are the biggest contributors to savings currently? What's interesting, one of the big programs is home energy reports. And so that's where you're getting recommendations and reminders, hey, be efficient, be mindful when you have to get a new appliance to get an efficient one. Change your behaviors. And that program actually has a pretty big pronounced savings that we claim every year. And that requires kind of ongoing engagement. That's not a type of program where, I put in this new appliance and it's going to be inefficient. I don't have to bother with it anymore. Home energy reports is kind of this constant education and support to make sure customers are being mindful of their energy use. So that's probably a big one, at least on the residential side. And as I said previously, on the commercial side, LED lighting was a slam dunk. That was actually also residential too. So that's something that's changed even in the last 3 or 4 years. The lighting potential and savings have fallen. So those are probably two of the main ones. Some common examples of energy efficiency. I went through a couple just now. Let's see, what else could I talk about? On the commercial side, commissioning is a big one. So you have these big, complicated buildings, and some of them are not so big, but you have controls. Just think of a thermostat that control them. And guess what? Over time, those things just kind of get wonky and lose their settings or don't do as well, and they're optimized. And so commissioning is becoming a growing area. And we kind of couch that in different ways. There's strategic energy management. There's actual commissioning agents and firms out in the marketplace that help get buildings operating as best as they can with what's there, right? So it's not necessarily just putting on big new equipment or replacing stuff. It's a matter of fine tuning it so it's optimized with what you have. So that's a pretty common on the commercial side and a growing area of savings potential. And for the everyday person. I think appliances are what's been interesting is standards forcing everyday customers to kind of just you have to get something more efficient, like refrigerators, for example. You see the marketing stuff when you're looking at a fridge, like this only uses as much as a light bulb. over the course of a day. So like appliances and dishwashers and other things have really improved their efficiency over the years. So that's not something we don't necessarily rely on as much. And I think what we'll find over time is it's behavior. Like, are you leaving stuff on or off? That's not really an efficiency widget or appliance or gadget, but like it's you need to make good choices. So that's, I think, a growing area where people are just not turning stuff off. They're adding new things and plugging tons of stuff in. And so that's, I think, what one interesting area as we move forward of like what folks would call vampire loads in the past of just kind of, we're just plugging tons of stuff in and we never unplug them. So I think that's an interesting opportunity that's really applicable to everybody, right? You're charging stuff all the time.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. And if you see other things in the chat that you might know the answer to while Heather's speaking, you might go ahead and jump in there directly. But go ahead, Heather. Thanks, Mark.
All right. So those are all great questions. So I am going to talk about the distributed energy resource side of things. And included in that category are things like the community solar project you see here on the Bonnie Lake water tower, or a residential solar project, or a solar project on a business, or batteries that might be located at those same types of location. So basically, our goal for the integrated system plan is to build out our distributed energy resource capabilities while ensuring that all of those benefits are felt equally by all of our customers. So at least 30% of our customer benefits should go to named communities, and right now, 2.5% should go to customers with the deepest need. That's increasing to 6% next year. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give you a sense of the products and services that we have available today and that we're going to build on as part of this integrated system plan. And really, these products and services come out of a lot of work that we have done with the EAG actually over the last a handful of years, as well as community engagement efforts where we went out to members of the community that we wanted to make sure we were serving and asked questions and surveyed regarding where those gaps were and what we needed to fill. And it was really your input that helped us to look at things like expanding income eligible community solar so that more individuals could take advantage of that product and that their benefits would be even greater. We also have received a lot of support from the EAG on things like solar grants and have been able to give out about $750,000 a year for grants going on community-based organizations and tribal entities. A couple of the areas where we've really expanded in the last year or two have been these last two categories: multi-occupant solar and solar energy credit. And in both of those cases, what we're trying to do is find a way to compensate owners of solar for the energy that they put back onto the grid fairly. But in order to make sure, again, that these products are truly accessible to everybody, and knowing that there are high upfront costs, we've added enhanced incentives, or otherwise known as grants, to help cover the cost up to $250,000 for approved projects by basically eligible participants. So that could be a low-income housing provider that's looking to install solar on their property and then share those benefits in turn with their tenants at that apartment facility. Or it could be a food bank that is looking to put solar on their food bank, and maybe they have a really large roof, so they are larger than the solar grants. Well, their project is larger than the maximum provided by the solar grants, but they can come in for the solar energy credit and again receive up to $250,000 for that project to support that. Another area that's new for us is the flex batteries, or residential battery product. And this again is an area where we received, I think, a lot of good feedback on how the upfront cost of batteries is really prohibitive for a lot of customers and making that accessible. And a customer with a battery can then enroll in our demand response program and receive ongoing benefits. So again, we want to make sure that there's lots of people who can see those benefits and also benefit from the resiliency side of things or the outage protection from those. So we are offering up to $10,000 towards the upfront cost of a battery if you're income qualified. Or if you live on what is deemed an unreliable circuit or a circuit of greatest need, you might be able to receive $5,000 towards that battery, and then be able to participate in that demand response program. So similarly, we're working to build out a commercial battery product that's not available yet, but we hope to have it available within the next year. And again, we're going to try to build off of what we've learned and heard regarding these other products to make sure that equity is a part of it, that we have these enhanced incentives. And when we talk about commercial batteries, again, that could be a community center that could take advantage of that battery and become a warming shelter, or it could be a food bank where a battery really allows them to keep their food cold in an outage situation. So that's a really important product that we want to bring forward to help, again, fill those gaps. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to provide in this slide a little bit of context around what the types of benefits are provided by each of these. So, it comes in the form of either an on-bill credit for the energy that project or that share of a project is putting back onto the grid, or it could come in the form of a grant that helps pay for the cost of a project to go forward. Or it could be the ability to participate in, again, the demand response program to receive those ongoing on-bill benefits. And then finally, things like resiliency, so energy backup so that you don't lose, refrigeration or heating or whatever in an outage situation. And then, of course, the community health indicators can be a part of that too. Next slide, please. So with all of that, the one thing I do want to talk about, though, is the barriers to adoption that we've noticed. These are not inexpensive technologies to adopt. They come with a high upfront cost. And again, we try to address that through the incentives that we're providing. But even though with those incentives, there are barriers to participation that can make it very hard. You have to own your roof or you have to own your home to participate in a lot of these directly. Solar's not a good fit if you have a lot of shading, and you also have to have a roof that's got really good quality. So it's got to have at least 15 years of life left on the roof to make it a worthwhile investment. And then solar and batteries both might require electrical upgrades to the home or business, and a panel upgrade to allow or accommodate for these technologies can be upwards of, $8,000 alone. So, and that's outside of kind of the incentives that are provided. So, the question that we really want to bring forward today is what is the right amount of funding for us to be providing for these projects in order to address these barriers and move forward while still factoring in the fact that those costs then are borne by all other ratepayers. And so where is that balance that we need to strike for all of this? And I see that C has her hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna, good job.
You have to have that 80% average median income, right? Or 200% federal poverty level. So to qualify for those incentives, you need to be within that threshold. So that's one thing. Who we see participating to this point, Well, primarily on the solar side, we're really reaching those customers through the community solar program, and the income eligible side of things. So where we're covering their cost to participate in community solar. Um, and that can, right now, if I had some numbers I was going to share with you, that I'm just trying to find where in my notes that is now. So if we were to assume that we were going to meet the 30% of named communities target with income eligible community solar, the cost will come to $4 million each year. And that's just for the 80 megawatt target. So if that target increases, then that threshold also increase and that cost increases. And keep in mind, that's an annual figure. That's not a 4 million one time. We're covering their cost to participate every single year for as long as we operate a community solar program. For batteries, a battery can cost about, and this is a bit of a challenge, but anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 for a battery, and it's a 10 kilowatt battery. And we're covering $10,000, and that doesn't include if they need any upgrades. Now, where we are seeing uptick is a lot of tribes are interested in putting batteries in their tribal elder housing. So that's been a very popular thing right now, and we've seen, I'd say, about 40 batteries go in for tribal elder housing where that benefit is being experienced by the person living in that home. But I think we are realizing and that there are some challenges beyond that. We've seen a few come in outside of the tribal housing, but it is costly. And if we were just to try to meet the deepest need target for the batteries, I think we figured out it would be about 2 million at the 2.5%, it's about $2 million a year.
You
Just
mean,
at the 2.5%. So we'll go to 5% when we go to 6% or 5 million to help cover the $10,000 for their battery.
I guess, I mean, thanks for those numbers. That
Yeah.
it does provide a little bit more context. I think something that's kind of confusing is like, it just kind of sounds like, and there's a question attached to this. It kind of sounds like there are, forgetting about the technology part of this, which is battery and solar. It sounds like there are customers in the PSC customer base who do not meet these requirements for all the barriers, like the financial and socioeconomic barriers that you had just talked about, that could actually be in greater need to just get their bills paid or something like that. I guess I'm just trying to understand like the demographics, and like I hear you give examples of like like tribal elders, which is great. Um, like I'm just trying to understand like where these customers sit in terms of like, I know that they have to meet certain thresholds, but that doesn't really make me understand where they fall in the customer base to kind of compare it with like everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like the difference between someone who's going to get their electricity cut off because they can't pay their bills, like I'm wondering where these customers who qualify for these technologies, because it seems a little bit focused on the technology versus like actually helping people who are truly in deepest need and making sure that like people on respirators or like people who can't pay their bills, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like I just want to get.
I think you're actually hitting on the thing that we're asking about, which is this the best is this the best use of those funds to help those customers, or is there a better way to help those customers than trying to put a battery in their home right now? And I think that's something we're struggling with because we have a requirement that says that of the commitment we've made to install distributed batteries, that 2.5% of that has to go to meeting customers with deepest need, which means it has to go directly to benefiting a customer, not a not a community center where the customer could come, but to a customer. And so I think what we're struggling with is, what does that look like then if those customers who are in deepest need don't even have the time?
You're finding that the folks that you're working with directly may not meet our what we've talked about. We have these AMI or federal poverty limits, thresholds, whatever we want to call them. You're finding people might qualify or exceed those, but they can't participate in these programs. But you're like, but they might be really good candidates to participate in the program. Is that really a simplistic way to describe this? Because I'm trying to understand that question more.
And some things in the chat, because I think everyone is aware, everyone is like getting to and touching on like literally the crux of the issue. And I think this is, which is great. I was going to say, and I'll say aloud to you that Heather, I'm like, you've got like 2 more slides, but this is the discussion we want to have anyway. So we'll stay here. But you know, there's these like there's at least these like dual pressures, if not more, on PSE, which is again not to say that that is like sort of like the sole thing that's happening or the sole entity that's being impacted, but it's like this dual pressure of this, you know, Mark talked about it, this the expectation to achieve more energy efficiencies with the like reliance through these different programs and technologies on customers to do that. And see, I thought you said it really well of like, it feels like it's more on the technologies and the customers, and that's basically true. And I think something that we've talked a lot about with PSE staff here is that we're kind of working backwards in a lot of ways where, you know, and I think this was set up really well by Mark and Heather of, you know, and even seeing it through equity moment of a lot of these initial sort of opportunities were not intended essentially to achieve equity. So folks that are saying that's not necessarily accessible or equitable, it's kind of true. And so now we're trying to figure out these ways to like perfectly fit this like tightrope walk that is almost, I'm not trying to say it's like doomed, but it's very difficult. It's almost, you know, it's very difficult to be able to maintain that. And so I think part of this conversation is to get some folks and get this generative conversations, but it's also to understand sort of this context that that we're in right now. And I think you know, I'll go to Megan here, and then I see Amy in the chat, and we'll let Heather and Mark respond. But yeah, this is, you know, there are trade-offs at all points here, and there isn't really a clear-cut outcome that says that one kind of trade-off is going to be either more equitable or more accessible than another. And that's the thing that's really challenging about the situation. Yeah, Megan. Thanks, Megan. I see Monica's hand. We'll go to you, Monica, and then I'm going to ask Heather and Mark to round out a little bit, because again, some of this conversation is maybe unfinished, but there's I want to also draw people back out into some of this bigger question. Again, if we're thinking about this 20-year planning, there are some decisions here, you know, especially as it relates to sort of the cost and cost burden. And so we need to manage in some way, which I know goes back to some of C's equity moment and some of the assumptions that we think maybe we can't escape, and also think about, you know, what you know, could or should be some of these alternatives. So we'll go to Monica, and then I'll ask Heather and Mark to sort of finish painting this picture.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about.
I really appreciate your comments, Monica, and 100% on everything you just said. I think you're right. Community solar has been, as I said, has been a great way for us to reach those customers. And I will just say that, you know, it's also been really helpful because we have some great state funding that we can leverage to help cover the cost of that program. So it really is just providing benefits to folks who qualify. I do want to really quick, I need to wrap up, but we do have a portable battery program that we launched as part of our wildfire preparedness work to help those customers. So we're really excited about that. However, it does not count towards this because it is not an interconnected resource that helps with our CETA compliance. So that's the rub on that one, but it is a valuable thing. So next slide, please. So I don't know that there's really much more to say about this. We've talked about the benefits and kind of where we need to go. We do have these targets that we're trying to reach. We are working on incorporating human-centered design. I saw Amy had a question. We are definitely trying to reach the right customers and talk to them in a way that makes it easy as possible to understand, and is more easily accessible. So in language materials for things like community solar and going to where those customers are, tend to congregate and feel comfortable and safe in order to help them to enroll. Those are things that are very important. Public participation is an important element of our integrated system planning process, and making sure we receive lots of good feedback. And then I'm going to ask to move on to the next slide, and I think that's Mark's to sum up.
Yep. Thanks, Heather, and thanks you guys for all your conversation and questions and feedback. It's been great. I think this continues to align with the conversation to get to these big targets, 2% or even 10%, low-income building stock, being mindful of what we just discussed, and customers without means to getting over that first cost barrier. That's exactly what we've been talking about. Requires a big, robust budget to do that if we're going to meet those goals and do it at full cost or some high proportion of cost. Just for context, our electric energy efficiency portfolio is around $140 million a year. So that's about $6 on the average customer electric bill. And what we're trying to wrestle with is how do we balance the expectations of doing more and doing them with the right customers in the right places, but then also, to fund that doesn't come from trees. It then drives up the bill itself. So we're trying to wrestle with how much more and how far do we go, also being mindful that is going to have a direct impact on the rates folks pay. And so it's kind of a balancing act that we're trying to wrestle with of what we want to do and what we should maybe afford to do. Last slide, please.
I'll just say really quickly on here, because I think the next slide is what would have been discussion questions. And so we've had a good conversation. I think I'll just say really quickly here, and really appreciate Heather and Mark and everyone for diving in on this. These are the types of conversations that we want to continue to explore with you all. Obviously there's a direct need and situation here with the ISP planning, and we want to make sure that feedback and conversations can continue to flow into that work that Mark and Heather are part of. And also it is a broader tension that comes up in so many different scenarios. I can't think about how many meetings I've been a part of the EAG where this type of tension comes up, which is this pacing of meeting these and achieving these clean energy targets with the sort of like direct inverse relationship of potentially causing inaffordability issues, especially for customers in the deepest needs. And so we have this strong desire from you all around the who and all of this, and the customer, and what do folks need, and how can we make sure that we're best fitting for the need with this sort of pressure. And again, it's a complicated thing that they feel like they're pitted against, and maybe some of the things that this EAG can help think about and broaden the perspective and hopefully help not just this utility, but just the work statewide achieve is this perspective and approach that doesn't necessarily have to pit those two things against each other. That feels like the dynamic that we're in often. And so I want to pause there on this topic and invite folks to thank Heather and Mark for the presentation, and thank you all for the discussion. I know there's several other things still going in the chat. Appreciate it. I don't know if Heather and
Thank
Mark.
you. I just wanted to say thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody's input and the discussion around this. It was super helpful, and thank you.
Thank you as well.
You too. See, I see your hand. I'm actually going to do like a quick 5 minutes, and folks can just sort of like shake it out, breathe it out, get some water, get up, and then we'll come back. I'll go to your hand, and then we'll transition to Brian and Uche. So if that works for folks, 5 minutes from now, roughly 6:18, 6:19, and then I'll come back to that question. Okay. We'll start to come back. That was just a brief break. Hopefully enough, like I said. Just a little bit of physical movement is always good. Get some calf raises if you're able, whatever you may need. Just want to say, yes, somatics. Yes. See, talk about somatics, and now I'm thinking about it. So I want to just acknowledge that there are a lot of really great ongoing comments in the chat that sort of idea generating and brainstorming and really wonderful energy. We will, of course, as always, save this chat and use that as part of the summary and notes. And I think this is actually, like I said earlier, a really good tee up and conversation for ongoing work this EAG is going to have, especially in the depth of sort of building out a perspective and a point of view on that balance, especially as it relates to affordability issues. So with that being said, I want to make sure I go back to see you had your hand up before the break. If you still wanted something to add in here, and then at that point in time, I'll turn it over to Brian and Uche, but I don't want to lose your hand. See.
I think it helps to continue that conversation about whether that is the most valuable thing for us to be doing, or should that money be spent another way. I don't think we're trying to say we shouldn't do any of it. It's just a matter of are these metrics always the right metrics? Or should there be more flexibility when we see that there's a better way to serve that customer?
Thank you, Heather. No, that's a fair question. Thank you, C. Okay. Transitioning here a little bit, I want to offer up Brian and Uche, recurring cameos to the EAG, back again to talk through equity metrics and planning. I'm sure several overlaps in what we've been talking about, again, going all the way back to the equity moment. And so this will be the remainder of our time. We'll have a little bit of time at the end to see if we've got folks for public comment, but otherwise, Brian and Uche, again, I'll talk your slides as you'd like me to.
Thank you, Ishmael. Just thumbs up if you all can hear me, hopefully. Great to be here with you all, EAG members. It's always a blast from the past when I come back to the EAG, and we're actually bringing up a topic that we started with way back when. So for you all who may not know me, I'm Brian Tyson, manager of the Clean Energy Planning and Implementation team. I want to introduce Uche Nude, who's on my team as well. She's our Energy Equity Initiatives Manager. She and I are going to go through the presentation today. And this portion of the presentation is really focused on equity metrics, more specifically customer benefit indicators. And Ishmael, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so what we want to do today with these equity metrics or customer benefit indicators is, first we want to talk about the challenges that we've been seeing since we developed the first set of customer benefit indicators and metrics. We've done a bit of research. I should say Uche has led the research to really understand where we could shift, where we could pivot in some of the metrics that we have. And then, of course, want to have a conversation, a dialogue with you all about specific indicators and metrics that we're looking to revisit and revise and get your feedback on the dimensions and the frameworks that we're looking at. All right, so we're going to go through those. And we've got 3 different ones, as I mentioned. If we can go to the next slide. So a bit of a background and history on customer benefit indicators. I'm going to switch between customer benefit indicators and CBIs. I'm saying the same thing there, but we say CBIs a lot. But the customer benefit indicator, they came from our CETA, I should say CEIP rules. And there's a couple of reasons that they were put in the rules. The first is that we were, by requirement, we have to include customer benefit indicators for one category, and I'll tell you what the categories are shortly. The other piece is that the customer benefit indicators were supposed to be created form consistent with this process, this advisory group process. So this is why we are back here. And the other key point is that anytime we want to make changes in the customer benefit indicators, we want to come talk to this group as well as make the updates in our next CEIP, or in this case would be the next ISP as well. And so it's important that we come back to this group to have this conversation based on what we know about the rules as they stand. But a very key point we want to make here is that the purpose of these customer benefit indicators is to measure our progress towards the outcomes we want to achieve. And this comes directly from the CETA statute, which talks about the distribution of burdens and benefits amongst all PSE customers, especially our most vulnerable and our highly impacted communities. So these metrics, these indicators are some of the tools that we use to measure that progress over time. Okay, next slide, please. So a bit of an overview. The top bar is the actual definition. And so that's why I kind of tried to phrase it in a different way, but that is the actual definition in the rule language there. Now, the next couple boxes are the categories I mentioned. These are important because within the statute and the rules, this is how we bucket our customer benefit indicators, meaning we need one for each of these categories. We are not going to go through all of them today. We're only going to cover 3 of our indicators today. But just to give you a global landscape of what they are, each of those categories, we need one indicator, meaning we need one way to measure progress according to each of these categories that you list here. Okay. Now, Uche and I are going to go through only 3, as I mentioned, outreach material, community health, and clean energy jobs. And there's one piece for you all just to keep in mind is that there's some guiding principles out there that we could look at to sort of follow as we develop or revise or update some of these indicators or metrics. One piece is that we want these to be outcomes based. We really want to focus on the outcomes. Again, this is about measuring progress over time. And the other key piece I'll call out is the reporting aspect of it, which is we want to be sure that this is data we can capture and data that is actually going to tell that story of the progress as we move forward in this clean energy transition. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And I want to just take a bit of pause because I think I called out about 4 members here who were with us from day one. Dennis, Jenny, I saw Jenny somewhere, Karia, and TJ. TJ may have jumped off, but there was an original group of EAG members. You all were with us in the beginning when we sat down in a Mentimeter with our sticky notes virtually, trying to put together which indicators, which metrics. So you all were really foundational and really laid the groundwork for creating this first set of indicators and metrics. And I think that's something you all should definitely be proud of. And I know we've had other conversations with a lot of the other members here, but just to remind you all that you all were really the building blocks of the indicators and the metrics that you see here. Now, some of the feedback I recall when we were first developing these metrics was we wanted to make sure that we have CBIs that have direct outcomes and that they're quantifiable is really important here, right? We want to be sure we can get the data. We want to be sure we can see those outcomes. The other thing we talked about is the short and the long term. So there are some metrics that we think we can measure sort of in the short term, but then there are others we want to measure over the long period of time. And then some of the priorities, and I think is reflecting of the conversation we just had with Heather and Mark, which is affordability and economic benefits. If I remember that, and some of you all may remember that, and it's probably top of mind for you all today, but those are the priorities when we think about some of the metrics and the indicators as well. And I think you'll see some of this reflected in the presentation Uche and I have over the next few metrics here. And resilience, yes. Thank you, TJ. Yes, resilience comes to mind as well. Okay, so let's get into it then. I'm going to do one of the metrics. Uche is going to do the other two. And let me set the stage for how we've grouped this together. In each of the indicators, there's going to be a list of issues. There's going to be the goal, meaning what we think we ought to achieve within this indicator. We're going to talk about potential changes or frameworks for how we could change the indicator, and we'll show you the questions as well. So you're going to get a very consistent view of the issues, the goals, potential impacts, and the questions themselves. Okay? All right, let's go. Let's start here with outreach material. And what you see in the green box there is the indicator that we have today, which is increase in culturally and linguistically accessible program communications for named communities. Now, the metric itself is very robust, and I think really gets to the heart and part of the goal. Or I should say the indicator does, but the metric behind this indicator is focused on outreach material available in English language and outreach material available in non-English language. And so there's a couple issues with the metric themselves. The first issue is that it's not really outcome focused, it's more of a static. Tell us the amount of material that you're passing out. Tell us the amount of material that you're sending out. And that doesn't really encompass what we're trying to do here for this particular indicator. It also doesn't really reflect the voices from our customers. It's sort of a one-way, one-directional, unidirectional, if you will, form of communication where we really can't encompass the stories. We really can't understand those voices from customers as we sort of try to make progress and try to make changes in our strategies as we move forward. And so because of those two really big issues, we think our goal really needs to be revising this metric to better reflect the efforts to reduce those barriers. So we want to implement some metrics that really reflect, okay, we've made a change here. We can see customers' voices here. We can see the impact, and we can see the impact in how specific customer groups are becoming more aware of what's out there. That's the way we want to change, sort of move, pivot this metric in that direction. And so that's what we want to do here. So if we can go to the next slide, what Uche has done and the team has done is what we want to think about is we want to think about some of the dimensions of what the metric could be. When we think about dimensions, remember the current metric really focuses on outreach material. That's it. We're handing out paper, we're handing out different items, that's it. But there's a lot of different areas when we think about outreach and engagement that we can really encompass in these metrics. One of which is language access. Now, you all had a conversation related to language access plan in the previous last month's EAG. Understand that we are completely aware of that, and we want to directly connect our indicator and the metric here to the result of that language access plan, right? So we recognize that as a critical piece of this. And then the next couple dimensions, if you will, are related to more holistically thinking about engagement, thinking about community partnerships. So not just really just emphasizing who we're creating those connections with, who we are having deep partnerships with, which many of you are doing that in your day-to-day. You're having and creating those partnerships. And so we want to be able to understand those partnerships and really understand, quantify, if you will, the type of impact it is having on our customers and in this energy transition. And then a final piece is about community feedback. And I touched on this earlier, which is really trying to understand how can we um, how can we how can we bring in some of the community voices and then be able to understand how does this then inform some of those future strategies that we may make in this clean energy transition. So I want to pause there. Dennis, I see your hand. And we've got two questions for you. I'll let you all read the questions, but essentially we're trying to understand from you all, one, do these key dimensions make sense? Are there any others we should really be focused on? And the second is, to the point I was just making, how can we better incorporate the stories to consistently include customer voices and inform our future strategies? So those are two questions I have for you all. Dennis, we'll start with you.
See his hands in a second. I see Monica in the chat that asked if there's a way to measure engagement and satisfaction. Can you ask people whether they're able to communicate with PSC when they needed to, perhaps via survey? I'll let PSC folks respond to that directly. I'm assuming that there's many versions of a survey that asks a type of question, and I think you're trying to get at, and maybe Monica will ask you, you're trying to get at sort of the tool by which we learn the information, but are you proposing that some sort of that satisfaction or like the quality of communication is
Okay.
I'm hearing a little bit in that question. I don't know, Brian, if you are too, and then I'll see C's hand and a couple in the chat. Like you alluded to there, Monica, of sort of in doing so, people can there's a higher quality of information exchange and communication. People are able to, you said, like, see themselves a little bit more. So I'm hearing what you said, and maybe I'm wrong, as like it allows, so that increased sort of access, if we know that it's of high quality, allows for people to be able to see the relationship between like their participation in any kind of program or feedback and the like evolution of, let's say, that program or sort of opportunity. I'm doing a little bit of stretching, but I'm trying to see if that's a way to maybe communicate.
I dig the stretch.
Cool.
Yes.
Good. Awesome. Okay, let's go to C's hand, and then we'll go to a couple in the chat.
Thank you for the example on cultural access, because you're right. Right now we have listed language access, but I think the cultural access is something we could possibly think about in the outreach and engagement bucket. But I think your point is, let's not just focus on the language side. There's a number of barriers, and I think Ishmael, you put it in the chat here. So it's really, we're trying to address all three of the barriers, whether it's cultural, linguistic, or just an awareness barrier in general. So see, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that ties directly with the goal we're trying to meet here.
Yeah, I interpret it a little bit, and I'll go a little, read some of the things from the chat here, especially from some folks that I know that aren't speaking aloud, which is great, using the chat. And then we'll go to Dennis, and then maybe we can go to the next indicator here. But I really interpreted what you were saying, C, as sort of this like confidence and ownership over like your own access to resource and your ability to know what pathways or opportunities that you have. And to your piece, it is cultural in a lot of ways, but I think I really resonated with like the asking for help is something that can be empowering, because it can give you a new pathway that wasn't there before. That is something that ties to your own, confidence and autonomy. So yeah, that's a great point. I'll just read a couple of things from the chat, and then we'll go to Dennis, and then I'll ask Uche to keep us moving here. So in the chat, Amy said, the service, and if anyone wants to respond directly in the chat, please do. As a service accessed by the public, how are you being a servant to the people? What is the ability to be accountable? D'Amico said qualitative and quantitative data collected will be effective, and that being intentional and proactive with customers that have and are currently engaged or participated. So I guess I'm seeing there, interpreting that this is all part of the like way in which relationships are not just formed, but sustained, ensuring that people that are already existing customers, that can be a really important part of voice. And I think maybe that's D'Amico speaking to that second point around how can we best incorporate stories and lived experiences meaningfully. And I see Jenny saying hand-holding or the connection or liaisoning seems to be lacking when it comes to CBO and deepest need customer interaction and assistance. So similar piece there around sort of the like sort of definition of help in this case, or the communication being more than a singular, as Brian was alluding to a little bit earlier, the output of like, did we do this material, as opposed to like, did people actually get fully connected? Okay. Dennis will have your hand, and then I'll invite Uche to take us forward.
Thank you all for the comments. So I want to, we can go to the next slide. I want to hand it over to Uche, and she's going to walk us through the next couple CBIs and metrics.
Uche, your audio is not coming through. I'm not sure if there's an adjustment that you can make.
Um, can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Great. I'm so
Wonderful.
sorry. Yeah, thank you everyone for your feedback and great comments. I'll be walking you through the remaining two CBIs and metrics. And so the first one we have here is our community health CBI. And for this CBI, our current indicator is improved public health, and our metric is hospital discharge rate. But at a first glance, we see that hospital discharge rate may seem like a viable metric for improved public health. But as it relates to our programs, it doesn't really seem very practical, or it's not a very meaningful measure when compared to our programs. And this is due to several reasons. First, the metric is really broad and influenced by a lot of factors that are beyond PSC's control. The metric highlights regional public health trends and misses the community-specific impacts that we.
Nope, I think your sound went out, Uche.
Oh, okay.
Try again. There you are. You're back.
Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening
Oh, it's
here,
okay.
but I'll just go on. Another issue we uncovered is the data accessibility is pretty challenging due to privacy concerns. And even when data is available, it's usually very technical and complex, difficult to interpret in ways that support equity-centered interventions. And so the main issue here is that the hospital discharge rate is not an appropriate measure for evaluating the outcomes we really want to see. As Brian mentioned, it undermines that purpose and even contradicts our guiding principles. So we asked, what if we shifted our focus from public health to community health? And you might be wondering what difference it makes. Well, according to the Center for Disease Control, the aim of public health is to improve the health of broad populations through disease prevention. And then community health, on the other hand, shares the same objective, or I would say similar objective, but it takes a different approach. Its aim is to improve the health, but focusing on the specific and unique needs of communities and localized communities, I would say. It recognizes that improved health goes beyond the absence of diseases to include those social, economic, and cultural conditions in the environment where we live, where we work, we play, we worship, and all. And these conditions are also known as the social determinants of health, and they include factors like food, housing, transportation, social support networks, and more. And it's also important to highlight on this note that according to the World Health Organization and numerous studies that have really looked at social determinants of health and the impact it has on, public health, the studies have shown that health disparities are largely driven by these social determinants of health. And interventions that target these social determinants of health have also been proven to be really effective at addressing historical health inequities. So with this understanding, we really want to shift our focus from hospital discharge rate, since it's really not very meaningful in comparison to our programs. And we really want to move our focus on metrics that better capture how our programs enhance community health through improvements in social determinants of health. We're also interested in exploring how our community partners and our customers, such as our solar grant recipients, which includes the CBOs, tribal entities, housing authorities, reinvest in services that support community well-being. Ultimately, we would love to highlight those community-specific impacts through the lived experiences of our customers to show how benefits are distributed in named communities. Can we go to the next slide, please? And the potential areas of impacts we would really love to track would include food security and nutrition, housing, housing stability, tribal community support, and more. But on this note, to meaningfully measure improvements in community health, I just want to let us know that we will be applying a grounded theory approach to explore how our DER programs intersect with the social determinants of health, as we outlined here. And as our DERs evolve, we would love to hear your thoughts on what other considerations do you think we should keep in mind as we expand this framework to include those emerging technologies like our solars, batteries, and microgrids? That's my first question. Okay, I see a hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Megan. And I just want to, as you respond, I just want to acknowledge we're getting close to time, so we'll have this and get some responses here. And then maybe, Uche, before we wrap, if you can just share the questions for the last indicators, and maybe we can share them out after this meeting and try and collect some feedback indirectly. But yeah, I want to be able to give Megan and others a chance here.
Very important aspect to consider, especially as we think about battery programs and its effects or how it can impact issues around climate change. But thank you, that's good to note. Any other questions?
Other folks here. So similarly to the last one, trying to think about the changing of these dimensions. Go ahead, Monica.
I guess
If I really understand your question, Monica, are you asking how we're thinking about the PSC specific impact versus the societal impact? I didn't really get that.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the question about the risk in the public health approach, but seeing that maybe those same risks are there in the community health approach, and having to balance or wrestle between PSC direct impacts versus just the broader societal things that will have a huge weight.
So most of its impacts are going to be tracked across our customers in named communities, and that is what, I mean, we can actually, but that's what we hope to measure and tie to the PSC specific impacts, if that makes sense. So, but the focus here is measuring those outcomes as it relates to those customers or our community members that we really want to serve. And so, yeah, that's my take on that. But as we move to the ISP, I know that, tracking those societal impacts is also part of our efforts. And I know that this also informs the societal impacts, but for the sake of, CIP, or rather the CBIs and our metrics, it's our targets or our priority customers are the customers in named communities. And so I don't know if that helps.
So just to clarify, does that mean you're asking individuals to report on their kind of health changes that are receiving maybe PSE services or benefits?
So our focus is really on community members, and we are hoping to track those impacts in communities, maybe through some of our community partners or our CBO customers, and try to understand how maybe participating in some of these programs, for instance, like our solar grants, how they are able to reinvest in certain services that support community well-being. And so a lot of the feedback will definitely be through the lived experiences of the customers themselves, because we hope to build insights from those lived experiences. And we know that, we can achieve that through those deep partnerships with our CBOs or our other customers that serve those customers in need, the marginalized and disadvantaged customer groups that, we cannot directly reach, but we can reach through these essential services or by supporting community-based organizations.
So I just wanted to add to Uche's point that I think this CBI, and I'm going out over my skis here, Brian, but I think this CBI was put in there as part of assessing the vulnerability of the community. So remember, named communities, highly impacted communities, and vulnerable populations. The highly impacted communities was a State Department of Health metric looking at vulnerability in the community. So I think it was understood that PSE isn't really impacting the community health, but it was making sure that we understood the impacted communities that we are working within.
Yep, that's right, Troy. Thanks for that.
We're at time here. Uche, I'd love for you to just it's super fast, so I apologize for being abrupt, but could you just allude to this final indicator, and then maybe we can think of a way that we can get some feedback from folks off this, and then we'll wrap the meeting there.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for your contribution. So with this CBI, increase in quantity and quality of clean energy jobs. On the surface, it seems straightforward, but in practice, it's really difficult to implement because it's really difficult to accurately track an increase in the quantity of jobs without accounting for those job losses. In addition to that huge challenge, there are challenges around the definition. So there isn't any utility guidance on what we should consider to be clean energy jobs. Some have defined it broadly and associated all sorts of jobs that result from clean energy projects. Some have taken a very narrow approach and try to be specifically targeting engineering jobs, really highly technical jobs. There are issues around data access due to the multiplicity of stakeholders. There's also the lack of uniformity across regions. We have a lot of out-of-state utility scale projects. And so the data we get is difficult to verify. Like I said, we depend on external parties or stakeholders for data. So we have a lot of challenges with the current metric. And for us to really, going back to what Brian had said earlier, to really measure the outcomes we really want to see, what is actually important, I think it's important for us to shift again from the quantity of tracking that increase and trying to focus on tracking improvements in access to job opportunities created by PS's clean energy projects in named communities. And so based on the revisions we want to make, you can go to the next slide. The potential areas of impact we'll love to track around these dimensions. We have the jobs, both direct and indirect, workforce demographics, workforce training pathways is also an important dimension we want to see, because we do realize that it's even though there are jobs out there, but accessing those jobs could be really challenging, especially due to some systemic inequities that some individuals face. And so highlighting the importance of the training pathways is an important dimension we'll really want to see. And recognizing all these limitations, we would love your thoughts here as well. Should the focus be on direct clean energy jobs or jobs from clean energy projects more broadly?
Thank you, Uche. I know this is it feels so abrupt just because we've had such good conversation. I'm gonna close it here, and I know you have your hand, Dennis, and I apologize. We're going to get into it's going to be a really good conversation, and I want to be mindful and respectful of time. I want to commit to coming up. We'll come up with a way to try to pretty promptly get this question out to you all so you all can dive back in, and maybe we can consider sort of a flag of where we can actually have this verbal discussion again in the future. So I just wanted to ask Ujay to close us out with that. I really hate to not be able to get into a discussion about this because it's such an interesting question. But I do want to say I hope folks appreciate Brian and Uche for bringing this forward. Brian and Uche, if you have any closing thoughts, feel free to say aloud. But I want to just be mindful of where we are in our time.
Nothing for me. Thank you so much to the EAG. We always appreciate the opportunity to come talk here. Obviously, a lot of great discussions, so we look forward to returning.
Thank you, Jay, as well. Thank you, Brian. We'll close there. Thank you all so much for tonight. We'll be responding back to you all as we get into ongoing conversations. Know that there's no full EAG meeting coming up, but we've got a lot of different activities and things that we're hoping that y'all participate in. And so appreciate you all for tonight. Hope you have a great rest of your